In the affluent suburb of Lekki, Lagos, where the streets were lined with palm trees and every home seemed to compete in architectural grandeur, stood a mansion that seemed to command attention. Its gilded gates gleamed under the Lagos sun, and its towering marble columns hinted at opulence within. This was the home of Depo and Ifeoma Adawale, a couple whose wealth and influence were as vast as the estate they lived in. Yet, despite their immense riches, the Adawales were known for their humility and generosity. They were the kind of people who remembered names, donated anonymously to causes, and treated their staff with dignity. The mansion was a marvel. Its sprawling grounds boasted manicured gardens, a shimmering pool, and a guesthouse that could rival some five-star hotels. Inside, the interiors were no less impressive. Chandeliers cast their golden light on plush furniture, and every corner of the house seemed to tell a story of success and sophistication. Yet, amidst this display of wealth, there was warmth, a sense of home that Depo and Ifeoma had carefully nurtured. The Adawales employed a small but dedicated staff to help manage their grand estate. Among them was Grace, a young woman in her early 20s who had come to Lagos from a quiet village in the northern part of the country. Grace was petite, with delicate features and an ever-present aura of calm. She had a tireless work ethic, always ensuring that the house was immaculate and that every detail, no matter how small, was attended to. Her story was not an uncommon one. Like many young women from rural areas, she had come to the city in search of better opportunities. But what set Grace apart was her character. She carried herself with quiet dignity, her soft voice often laced with gratitude for the life she now led. She had a gift for making herself almost invisible, seamlessly moving through the house, completing her tasks without ever disturbing the serene environment. The Adawales had grown fond of her. Ifeoma, especially, admired Grace's diligence, and would often take time to check in with her, asking about her family back in the village. Life in the mansion was as harmonious as one could imagine. Mornings were filled with the hum of activity as the staff prepared for the day, while evenings were reserved for quiet family dinners or the occasional grand event. Grace's routine was demanding, yet she never faltered. She often worked late into the night, ensuring that every corner of the vast estate was spotless. The sun streamed through the tall windows of the Adawale mansion, casting a golden glow on the marble floors. It was a picture-perfect afternoon in Lekki, with the gentle hum of activity filling the grand estate. Ifeoma Adawale was preparing to leave for her weekly charity meeting, an engagement she rarely missed. Dressed impeccably in a tailored Ankara dress, she exuded an air of elegance that matched her serene demeanor. As she walked down the hallway, her mind was already focused on the agenda for the day, organizing donations for the local women's shelter. But as she neared the kitchen, something unusual caught her attention. The door to the pantry was slightly ajar, and inside, she saw Grace, the young servant who had been with them for nearly 2 years. Grace stood with her back to the door, her small frame barely visible against the towering shelves. Ifeoma slowed her steps, curiosity piqued. She watched as Grace reached into a drawer, pulled out a bundle of cash, and hastily slipped it into her worn leather bag. For a moment, Ifeoma stood frozen, her serene face creased with a frown. Grace? Taking money? It was hard to reconcile the image before her with the Grace she thought she knew. The quiet, diligent girl who always seemed so grateful for everything the Adawales had done for her. Rather than confront her in the moment, Ifeoma chose to remain silent. She stepped back quietly, her heart heavy with a mix of confusion and disappointment. She didn't want to act impulsively or accuse Grace without understanding the full picture. Instead, she resolved to observe and gather more information. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. At her charity meeting, Ifeoma found it hard to concentrate. Her mind kept drifting back to the scene in the pantry. She replayed it over and over, wondering if there could be an innocent explanation. Was Grace holding the money for someone else? Had she been instructed to take it? But then why the secrecy? By the time she returned home, the weight of the situation had grown heavier. That evening, after dinner, she decided to share what she had seen with her husband, Depo. Depo was seated on the plush leather sofa in the living room, a book in his hand and a glass of scotch on the side table. The room, with its warm lighting and elegant decor, radiated comfort and tranquility. Ifioma joined him, her expression serious. "Depo, there's something I need to tell you," she began, her voice soft but deliberate. He set his book aside and turned to her, instantly sensing the gravity of her tone. "What is it?" "I saw Grace taking money from the pantry this afternoon," she said, choosing her words carefully. Depo's brow furrowed in surprise. "Grace? Are you sure?" Ifioma nodded. "I'm certain. She didn't see me, but I saw her take a bundle of cash and put it into her bag." For a moment, Depo was silent, processing the information. He leaned back against the sofa, his expression thoughtful. "That's not unexpected. Grace has always seemed trustworthy. Maybe she was holding it for someone else." "That's what I thought too," Ifioma replied, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "But if that's the case, why the secrecy? Why not tell us?" Depo sighed, running a hand over his neatly trimmed beard. "It does seem strange, but let's not jump to conclusions just yet. Grace has been with us for a long time. She's never given us a reason to doubt her before." "I agree," Ifioma said. "That's why I didn't confront her immediately. I wanted to talk to you first and figure out how to handle this. I don't want to accuse her without understanding what's going on." Depo nodded in agreement. "You did the right thing. Let's keep an eye on her for now. Maybe there's an explanation we're not seeing." Ifioma felt a small sense of relief at Depo's calm approach. It was one of the things she admired most about him, his ability to remain composed and rational, even in troubling situations. Over the next few days, Ifioma's resolve to observe Grace grew stronger. She paid closer attention to the young servant's movements and behavior, looking for any signs that might explain the incident. But Grace remained as diligent and soft-spoken as ever, her work impeccable, her demeanor unchanged. Despite her best efforts to keep the incident from weighing on her, Ifioma couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that lingered in the back of her mind. She trusted Grace, but trust, once questioned, was difficult to fully restore without answers. As the sun set that evening, casting long shadows across the mansion's grand halls, Ifioma made a silent vow. She would get to the bottom of this mystery, not out of suspicion, but out of a desire to protect the delicate balance of trust and harmony within their home. In the days to come, that balance would be tested in ways she never imagined, and the shadows lurking in their gilded mansion would begin to take form. 2 days passed since Ifioma had first seen Grace slipping money into her bag. Though she had hoped it was a misunderstanding, the unease lingered. She tried to focus on her daily routine, but her mind kept returning to that moment in the pantry. Each time she crossed paths with Grace, Ifioma's heart tightened. She found herself watching the young servant more closely, noticing every movement, every glance, every step. It was on a quiet Wednesday afternoon, when the house was unusually still, that Ifioma's suspicions deepened. She had just finished a call with a charity partner and decided to check on the household's weekly financial records. As she passed by Depo's study, the door slightly ajar, she noticed Grace inside. Her back was to the door, her posture tense. Ifioma paused, peeking in just enough to observe without being seen. There, in the soft light of the study, Grace stood by Depo's desk, her hands moving quickly. Ifioma's eyes widened as she saw Grace open Depo's wallet, which he often left on his desk. Grace hesitated for a moment, then pulled out a few notes. Glancing around nervously, she folded the money carefully and slipped it into her leather bag, which hung loosely from her shoulder. Ifioma's heart raced. It wasn't just a one-time incident. This was the second time she had seen Grace take money, and this time, from a much more personal place. It felt like a betrayal, a crack in the foundation of trust they had built over the years. Could Grace really be stealing from them? And if so, why? Ifioma stepped away quietly, her mind swirling with questions. She decided not to confront Grace immediately, choosing instead to gather her thoughts. Confrontation, she knew, required a careful approach, especially in matters involving trust and dignity. Later that day, as the golden light of sunset filled the house, Ifioma found Grace in the living room, folding freshly laundered linens. Her hands moved methodically, her face calm, as if nothing had happened. Ifeoma approached her, her voice steady but laced with a hint of concern. "Grace," she began, her tone gentle. "I saw you near the study earlier today. Is everything all right?" Grace froze for a brief moment, her eyes widening slightly before she quickly composed herself. She turned to face Ifeoma, her expression neutral but her hands now fidgeting with the linen. "Yes, madam," she replied, her voice soft. "I was just tidying up." Ifeoma studied her closely, searching for any sign of guilt or nervousness. Grace's face was calm, but there was a slight tremor in her voice, a subtle crack in her otherwise composed demeanor. "I see," Ifeoma said, nodding slowly. She decided not to press further, at least for now. "Thank you for keeping the house in order. I know it's not easy managing everything." Grace smiled faintly, bowing her head slightly in acknowledgement. "Thank you, madam." As Grace returned to her task, Ifeoma walked away, her mind still troubled. Something was clearly wrong, but Grace wasn't ready to share the truth. Ifeoma knew that forcing a confrontation might push Grace further into silence. Instead, she resolved to keep a close eye on her, determined to uncover the reason behind her actions. That evening, Ifeoma shared her thoughts with Depo once again. They sat in their cozy dining room, the table set for two. The flicker of candlelight softened the room's ambience, but the tension in Ifeoma's voice cut through the tranquility. "Depo," she began, her fork resting on her plate. "I saw Grace take money from your wallet today." Depo looked up, his expression a mix of surprise and concern. "Again?" Ifeoma nodded. "She was in the study. I watched her take a few notes and put them in her bag." Depo sighed deeply, leaning back in his chair. "This doesn't make sense. Grace has always been so reliable, so trustworthy. Why would she do this? That's what I'm struggling with," Ifeoma said, her voice tinged with sadness. "There has to be a reason. Maybe she's in some kind of trouble and doesn't know how to ask for help." Depo considered this for a moment, his brow furrowed. "If that's the case, we need to find a way to make her feel safe enough to talk to us." "I agree," Ifeoma said. "But I think we should wait a bit longer before confronting her again. I don't want her to feel cornered. Let's see if she slips up again, or if there's something else we can learn." Depo nodded, his expression thoughtful. "All right. But if it happens again, we'll have to address it directly." The couple finished their dinner in silence, both lost in their thoughts. The weight of the situation hung heavy over them, casting a shadow over their otherwise peaceful home. As Ifeoma prepared for bed that night, she couldn't shake the image of Grace standing in the study, her hands trembling as she took the money. Whatever was driving Grace to act this way, Ifeoma was determined to find out. Trust was a delicate thing, and she wasn't ready to give up on Grace just yet. But with each passing day, the shadows in their gilded mansion seemed to grow darker, and Ifeoma knew that the truth, whatever it was, would soon reveal itself. The third day dawned with a sense of anticipation in the Adawal household. Ifeoma had spent the morning organizing preparations for a grand dinner party, the kind of event that brought together Lagos elite for an evening of laughter, fine dining, and business discussions. The mansion buzzed with activity as the staff worked diligently to ensure everything was perfect. Amidst the flurry of activity, Ifeoma tried to push her worries about Grace to the back of her mind. She wanted to focus on the evening ahead, but the memory of the previous days lingered like a shadow. 2 incidents of theft could not be ignored, and though she hoped for some rational explanation, the uneasy feeling in her chest refused to subside. That afternoon, as Ifeoma made her way to her bedroom to retrieve a pair of earrings that matched her outfit, she noticed something unusual. The door to her room was slightly ajar. She paused for a moment, her heartbeat quickening. Quietly, she stepped closer and peered inside. There, standing before her ornate jewelry box, was Grace. Her small frame seemed to tremble as she carefully lifted a delicate gold necklace, one of Ifeoma's most cherished possessions. The necklace, a family heirloom passed down from her grandmother, shimmered softly in the afternoon light. Ifeoma's breath caught in her throat. She watched as Grace, her hands unsteady, placed the necklace into her leather bag, the same bag that had concealed the stolen money days earlier. Without a word, Grace turned and hurried out of the room, completely unaware that Ifeoma had seen everything. For a moment, Ifeoma stood rooted to the spot, a storm of emotions swirling within her, shock, anger, and a deep sense of betrayal. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was personal. The gold necklace held sentimental value, a symbol of her family's legacy and love. That evening, the dinner party went on as planned. The mansion sparkled with an air of opulence and festivity, the guests oblivious to the tension simmering beneath the surface. Ifeoma, ever the gracious hostess, smiled and entertained, but her mind remained preoccupied with the events of the afternoon. When the last guest had departed and the mansion had finally fallen quiet, Ifeoma knew it was time to confront Grace. She found her in the servants' quarters, tidying up after the long day. Depo, sensing the seriousness of the matter, joined them. His presence added weight to the conversation that was about to unfold. Grace, Ifeoma began, her voice calm but firm. We need to talk. Grace looked up, her face pale. Yes, madam? Ifeoma took a deep breath, her gaze unwavering. Why are you stealing from us? First the money, and now my necklace. Grace's eyes widened in shock, and for a moment, she looked as if she might deny it. But the weight of Ifeoma's words, combined with the intensity of Depo's stern expression, seemed to break something within her. Her eyes filled with tears, and she lowered her gaze, unable to meet their eyes. Madam, I can explain, she said, her voice trembling. I took the money and the necklace, but not for myself. Then for whom? Depo demanded, his tone sharp. Grace sobbed, her composure crumbling. My younger brother is sick, sir. He's in the village, and the hospital won't treat him without payment. They said he needs surgery, and I didn't know how to raise the money. I was desperate. She paused, her hands clutching her apron tightly. I didn't want to steal, madam. I swear. I thought if I took what I needed, I could repay you once my brother was better. I didn't know how else to ask for help. I was ashamed. The room fell silent, the gravity of Grace's words hanging heavily in the air. Ifeoma and Depo exchanged glances, their expressions softening. The anger that had fueled Ifeoma's confrontation began to dissolve, replaced by a profound sense of compassion. Depo spoke first, his voice calmer now. Grace, why didn't you come to us? You've been with us for years. We would have helped you. Grace shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. I didn't want to seem ungrateful. You've already done so much for me. I was afraid you'd think I was taking advantage of your kindness. Ifeoma stepped forward, her tone gentle but resolute. Grace, we would never turn our backs on you in your time of need. We care about you, and we're here to support you. But stealing from us, no matter the reason, breaks the trust we've built. Grace nodded, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I'm so sorry, madam, sir. I know I've let you down. Ifeoma placed a hand on Grace's shoulder, offering a small but reassuring squeeze. You've made a mistake, Grace, but it doesn't mean we can't move forward. We'll help your brother. We'll ensure he gets the treatment he needs. Depo nodded in agreement. But from now on, if you're ever in trouble, you come to us directly. No more hiding, no more taking matters into your own hands. Grace looked up, her eyes filled with gratitude and remorse. Thank you, madam. Thank you, sir. I'll never forget your kindness. That night, as the mansion settled into silence, Ifeoma and Depo reflected on the events of the past few days. They realized that wealth was not just a privilege, but a responsibility, a means to uplift those around them. And while trust, once broken, would take time to rebuild, they believed in giving Grace the chance to make amends. In the end, the golden necklace was returned to its rightful place, but the true treasure lay in the renewed understanding between the Adawales and Grace, a bond strengthened by compassion and forgiveness. Silence hung heavily in the room, broken only by the sound of Grace's quiet sobs. Ifeoma and Depo exchanged a look, their eyes speaking volumes. In that moment, the depth of Grace's pain and desperation was clear. Her tears were not just of guilt, but of shame and the burden she had carried alone. Dapo was the first to break the silence, his voice steady but filled with compassion. "Grace, why didn't you just come to us? You've been part of this household for years. We would have helped you without hesitation." Grace wiped her tears, her hands trembling. "I was ashamed, sir," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "You've been so good to me, and I didn't want to seem ungrateful. I thought I could handle it on my own, but I was wrong." Ifeoma sighed, her earlier anger now replaced by a profound sense of empathy. "Grace," she said gently, "we've always seen you as part of this family. Families help each other in times of need. If you're ever in trouble, you must come to us. Trust is the foundation of everything we've built here." Grace nodded, her eyes brimming with gratitude. "I'm so sorry, madam. I know I've broken your trust, but I promise I'll do whatever it takes to make things right." The next morning, Dapo and Ifeoma wasted no time. They contacted the hospital in Grace's village and arranged for her brother's immediate treatment. The funds were transferred, and by afternoon, Grace received confirmation that her brother had been admitted and would receive the care he needed. When Grace heard the news, she fell to her knees, overwhelmed by their generosity. "Thank you, madam. Thank you, sir. You've saved my brother's life. I'll never forget this." Ifeoma helped her up, offering a kind smile. "Grace, we're glad we could help. But remember, no more hiding things from us. We're in this together." In the days that followed, the household began to heal. Ifeoma and Dapo sat Grace down for a heartfelt conversation about trust and honesty. They emphasized the importance of open communication, assuring her that she could always rely on them. The incident, while painful, became a turning point in their relationship. Grace's loyalty deepened, and she worked even harder, determined to repay the kindness and trust the Adawales had shown her. Ifeoma and Dapo, too, gained a renewed understanding of the struggles people often keep hidden, even those closest to them. The experience also reinforced their commitment to helping others. They expanded their charitable efforts, focusing not just on broad initiatives but on the personal stories of those in need. Through their actions, they sought to create a ripple effect of kindness and compassion. In the end, the incident was not a fracture in their bond, but a lesson in forgiveness and the strength of human connection. Together, they built a home not just of wealth, but of trust, understanding, and unwavering support.